Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kaustubha. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/wisdom of the sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from Texas. This is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast with your host, Raghunath, and co-host and senior educator at the Bhakti Center in New York, Kaustubha Das. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the prairies.
You're out there, huh?
And because I'm driving across the country.
Whoop. Already he's breaking down. Raghunath, are you there?
And I can't be 100% present. I cut out.
Hey, Raghunath, you're cutting out big time.
I can hear you.
That's great that you can hear me, but you were like, let's see. But, fortunately, let's say this. Raghunath's appearance today was meant to just be a cameo appearance because we knew that this might happen. He's way out in Texas. He's driving across the country. He's driving for Madhu's wedding, and he's got to arrive by Friday morning. So he's been driving, it's been like Smokey and the Bandit out there, right?
BJ and the Bear. Can you hear me?
Yeah, BJ and the Bear.
So we have Jai Jagannath. You don't know BJ and the Bear?
I mean, I know the name, but I can't remember what it means.
It was about a trucker who traveled America with a monkey as his partner.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, we have Jai Jagannath because my signal might go out, and everybody seems to love Jai Jagannath, and I have a deep anxiety that people are going to love him more, and he's going to take over, and he's the real deal.
Let go of that anxiety.
Not like this diverter, Raghunath, who diverts us from the Bhagavatam all the time. So I'm just keeping tabs. Okay. I couldn't let the show go on without me. And Kaustubha, you and I have a long history in Texas. I just wanted to bring that up. Yep, Shelter, in one way, my band, Shelter, we started, our band was like, we were all brahmacharis, and we came through Texas, and we stayed in Houston for a month. And we just started like preaching Bhakti-yoga to the straight edge kids of Texas.
Right.
And we played in the Houston temple. There was remember that Prasadam hall where people would eat?
Yeah.
And we set up a stage there, and we played there, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj, your guru, came to the show. It was pretty amazing.
I was in jail at the time.
Kaustubha was in jail. We kid you not. Kaustubha. It is worth telling this story. Kaustubha distributing books in a parking lot in Lubbock, Texas, or something. Where were you?
Houston. I was in Houston.
You were in Houston. He was distributing books, and what happened? Tell the story. It's a good story.
Oh no, it's too long to get into. But basically, a redneck cop, really, I mean, honestly, he brutalized me. He brought me back into his, he handcuffed. What he did was he saw me with my books, and he walked up to me and he handcuffed me. He slammed me against another car, and he handcuffed me behind my back, and really, really roughly, he was kind of pulling my arm behind my back. And then he said, "You just assaulted a police officer." And that guy right there is my witness. And there's a guy there "Yep, me, I'm the witness." And then he dragged me back into the private room somewhere, and he was kind of brutalizing me there. And that's where he said the famous line, now that after I was roughed up and handcuffed, he had my books on his desk and with the Bhagavad Gita, and he was calling some other kind of truck
Boss
or
or something.
some other kind of police car to come pick me up and take me to the jail. And
What was the famous quote? What was the famous quote?
And he's looking at the bug. He's got the Bhagavad Gita in one hand, and he's looking at trying to figure out what it is. And he says, and he's talking to the other guy on the phone. He says, "We got ourselves some kind of Dalai Lama over here." I'll never forget that. Yeah, but that's, and because of that, I missed that. Was that your first ever Shelter concert or something like that?
Something like that. It was like back in the day. It was back in the day. And there's so many people are still around. I'm still in contact with kids who got into Bhakti from there, including Bram. He was like 13 years old, coming to the temple, starting a Krishna conscious fanzine. He's 13. Now and he still comes to the Bhakti Center.
He's a teacher, a high school teacher in New York City now.
You know, he came to a satsang that I did at the Bhakti Center, and I pretty much sort of knew everybody-ish.
Right.
Because I had just gotten back from India. This was maybe 5 years ago. And I see, like, who's this man with these very beautiful tattoos? And I just started looking at his tattoos, and he goes, "You don't remember me, do you?" I was like, "No, sir." And he's like, "I'm Bram. We were a friend. You know, I was from Houston." And I was like, "Oh my God." You know, because these people get into Bhakti before they even hit puberty. And it's like shocking to see them in their adult form. And yeah, there were so many people, you know, all those guys. You know, I want to give a shout out here.
Okay.
Because
to Texas?
Well, shout out to Texas, but a shout out to you, my friends, because I always gave the book distributors a hard time, and they always gave me a hard time. We had this little back and forth. You know, look at Raghunath and his band thinks he surrendered to Krishna, and I was like, look at these book distributors just walking around, so
bothering people,
selling them books on the street. And I will say that there is no material benefit from getting a bag of Bhagavad Gitas and walking into a Best Buy parking lot and trying to distribute, Bhagavad Gitas, Chaitanya Charitamritas, and things like that. You need to do it just because you so believe in those books. Now, people will give devotees of Krishna a hard time. They'll say, "Oh, these guys are just peddling books on the street." And if you actually think about it, it's not like they're inhuman machines. They're people like you and me.
They're people with feelings.
People. Kaustubha is a person with feelings. And for them to actually go on the street and put their ego on the line, where they're actually approaching people they don't know, "Will you please take this book? I think you'll find some value in it." That is an amazing sacrifice. Why? Because people aren't nice. Most people are like, "Leave me alone, get lost, blah, blah, blah," especially in New York. But the thing is, what are you getting out of it? You're living in a van, right? You're not getting paid. You're doing it just out of your deep love and attraction for sacred literature. And even though, you see that movie Airport or something where they're making fun of the Krishna guy distributing books in an airport, as oh yeah, what a, in a material sense, you think these guys are losers. What are they doing with their lives? It is the most beautiful offering to throw your ego. You're not doing it for money. Everybody's doing everything for money, right? You're not doing it for money. You're not doing it for ego, especially because you have people I've seen people try to sell things on the street, like regular things, like maybe they work for Greenpeace or something like that. Yeah. It is a very difficult job because people are just like, "Leave me alone, leave me alone, leave me alone." Yet you do it and imbibe the Bhagavad Gita teachings where it's like, it's got nothing to do with how people treat me. I'm doing this because I want to serve Krishna, and Krishna's message is important, and I'm going to do it. And I don't care about money. I don't care. I'm going to do it. And what you do is, in that act of distributing books, and I highly recommend people just try it sometime, you become a transcendentalist. You experience pure bhakti yoga instantly because you're no longer doing it for any material purpose. You're not doing it to, "Hey, I only distribute in beautiful places or tropical places or scenic places." You'll do it anywhere, wherever, whoever your brahmachari leader was. And you have to be out of your mental platform. I was about to say out of your mind. You have to be out of your material mind. And I can tell you, Kaustubha, I'm going to give all
Was
credit
out
to
of his
Kaustubha.
mind.
He was out of his material mind. And he used to go out and just distribute, and he would never get mental. I go, one time he took me to New Jersey. You don't remember this. Do you remember? And we were having this Bhagavatam class. It was probably freezing cold. And I was like, I was not a good book distributor, and I didn't like to do it. And Kaustubha, we had a Bhagavatam class. We had a whole morning program. We sang all the songs. We were in Kaustubha's van, and we were in like a Best Buy parking lot somewhere in Paramus. And everyone's like, all right, let's get out of here. We're going to distribute Bhagavad Gita's all day long. I got out of that van, and I go, I'm not getting out of it. I'm going back in the van. You're like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm just not doing it.
Doing it.
I'm not doing it. I'm not going to walk around.
No, but you're just supposed to do it now.
Nope, I'm not doing it. I refused to get out of the van. I don't even think I made it out the van door. It's not funny. It's sad. It's very pathetic and sad. But you know what? It's incredible. If you want to experience pure Mara, you like Krishna consciousness, Mara?
Yes.
She's like, yes.
I want you to experience what it's like of pure bhakti. I want you to take a bag of Bhagavad Gitas and walk around the city of Hudson and Kinderhook where you live and approach people you don't know and say, hello, sir. Today I'm giving out good tidings of joy, the message of Lord Chaitanya and Sri Krishna from the Bhagavad Gita. And you're going to be all awkward and feel weird, and then you're going to do it, and then you're going to feel so good. I want you to experience pure bhakti. I'm ordering you to do that, my friend.
I'm terrified.
Can I just learn a shloka?
Yeah, all of a sudden learning shlokas sounds great.
What do you think? What do you think, Jagannath?
It's amazing. I myself distributed books for about 8 years after I joined the monastery. So I confirm everything that you're saying. And for me, one of the worst experiences on book distribution was being ignored.
I could just cold ignore it.
Yeah, I actually didn't mind being called names or being like some envious statement. I used to appreciate that because at least there was engagement. And but to be ignored as if I didn't even exist,
it crushes the ego. And I had a big ego. I have. I'm still playing with my ego. But yeah, it rips the ego, which is the very thing we're trying to overcome in this game, in the Bhakti-yoga game. And so that way you can transcend immediately, isn't it?
Yeah, full disclosure, I think certainly there's a history of people doing it in not so nice ways, but that being said, if you really embrace it with in the right context, with the right mood and the right understanding, it becomes an incredible practice of yoga where it's like, I'm going to keep responding with positivity in a mood of service. And no matter how I'm treated, some people will treat you like you just like you're a deva that just descended. Like they're like you. Some people actually treat you like, my God, you're such a special person to be doing this. Right. And other people will think that the devil sent you here. And, you know.
Yeah. And they want to kick your butt.
Yeah. And other people will think that you're just a complete loser, and other people will ignore you, and so you get this wide variety of responses. And the yoga is that, can I remain even-minded and just fixed in my pure intention to serve? So it does become really dynamic like that, and the fact is, I had my life threatened many times.
Who threatened Kaustubha? You know what I mean? Who threatened this guy?
Especially down south. Be careful down there, Raghu. Driving around.
Dr. Chris is expressing some concern about the volume. It might just be the phone. I was going to say maybe because they're just used to hearing Raghu at a much louder rate.
Am I not loud enough, or am I too loud?
Because you're on the phone, not with your fancy mic. Maybe it's a little bit reduced than normal.
Oh, don't worry. I can always turn it up.
Okay.
That's one of my gifts.
All right. But maybe it's time for us to get into Bhagavatam in any case. Raghu, are you going to hang out with us? And are you going to hang out?
if I'm allowed in, I'll hang
Come on,
out.
Rob. Of course you're allowed to
I want to
out.
hear from Jai Jagannath because
Oh,
Okay.
no.
he's wonderful. We heard so many good positive feedback about him, so I wanted to drink up more of this sweet nectar. And thanks for coming in on late notice in fear. I couldn't stop. I couldn't pull over and
special.
drive. I couldn't pull over and drive. I mean, I couldn't pull over because I'm on a marathon. I got a flat tire yesterday, and now
Ooh.
I'm barely gonna make it to this wedding. So
But you're gonna make it.
we're gonna make it. Yeah.
Okay. Let's dive in. Everybody ready?
Yes.
Yeah.
Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narotamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam mudirayat. Raghu.
Before reciting the Srimad-Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisances to the Supreme Lord, Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author.
Nasta
Nasta
prayeshva.
prayeshva bhadreshu nityam. Go ahead.
Bhagavata Sevya. Bhagavata Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Hit it.
By
I'll hit
regular
it.
attendance in classes in the Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart will become eradicated, and loving service to the Supreme Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, will be established as an irrevocable fact.
Om Jnanatimidandasya
Jnanasalakaya.
Chakshur
You go.
Unmilitam
I'll just
Yena
listen.
Tasmai
You're
Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual masters have opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto them. Okay. All right. So, Jai Jagannath, as Raghunath said, people really did have a great response to your to the interview we did with you. It's just on Sunday.
Fortunate to hear that and grateful and blessed. Thank you.
And we said, we got to bring Jai Jagannath back. And then, Raghunath's tire breaks down or something happened, so he's driving like crazy right now. And we got you back here sooner than we thought. So I'm happy about that.
As am I. Thank you.
So, Jai Jagannath, we are reading from the Srimad-Bhagavatam, 3rd canto. It's the 9th chapter, which is Lord Brahma's prayers.
An amazing chapter.
An amazing chapter. These are prayers for creative energy. And Lord Brahma has spoke, and now we're getting to the place where Lord Vishnu begins to respond to those prayers. So, on this show we talk about levels. I think we should call it sage level. Sage level 1, sage level 2, sage level 3, and sage level 4.
Okay.
All right. So sage level 1 is how the Bhagavatam opens up with the sages of Naimisharanya placing their questions before Sutta Goswami. And then Sutta Goswami says, oh, well, for me to answer all your questions, I got to take it to sage level 2. Let me tell you about the conversation that took place between Shukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Pariksit. And then Sukadeva will take it to sage level 3. Maybe we should call it sage stage. But that'll be hard to pronounce, I think. Sage stage 1, sage stage 2. Maybe we could do it. And so then he takes it to level 3 where he's describing a conversation between Maitreya and Vidura. And so text 26 was Maitreya speaking to Vidura. Okay. And then we're going to switch right back in a couple verses back to stage level 4. Go back down to stage 4. But we're beginning with text 27 and 28, which is describing, well, I'll read it, but this is describing, now we're going to get to the response of Lord Vishnu to the wonderful prayers of Lord Brahma, what's going to be revealed here. This is really interesting too. It's going to be revealed that Lord Brahma, who is really respected, you could say that he is the most intelligent person in the universe in one sense, because he's kind of the engineer of the whole universe. And throughout the Bhagavatam, it's like, don't we see like Brahma is kind of like generally, now there's one little breakdown there in the 10th canto, but generally he's seen as like the voice of reason, Do you see him that way?
He's called as Veda Garbha. And even in today's verses, he's referred to as Veda Garbha. And the word Garbha means womb. And Veda, so the womb from which all the Vedas are coming out. All knowledge is kind of exuding from him. So
Yeah.
it makes sense that he's the voice of reason.
Yeah, like even when everyone else is freaking out, like even though the devas and the higher beings and the prajapatis and he's kind of like the person there that can say, everybody all they turn to him because he always keeps his cool. He's always dignified. He's always got his head in his head's in the right place. And
Right.
but we see here that actually right at the beginning, he's feeling anxiety. He's feeling depression, and Lord Vishnu's picking up on that. So that's another thing that we should realize that's kind of comes with the territory of being in a material body and being in the material world. Is that we may have bouts of depression or bouts of anxiety. So we see starting right there at the beginning, right? So this is text 27 and 28 together. The Lord saw that Brahma was very anxious about the planning and construction of the different planetary systems and was depressed upon seeing the devastating water. He could understand the intention of Brahma, and thus he spoke in deep, thoughtful words, removing all the illusion that had arisen. All right. So even in this verse, there's the hint there, right? That of a cure for anxiety and depression. That through hearing the right words. Text 29. The Supreme Personality of Godhead then said, so now we're on sage level 4. He said, O Brahma, O depth of Vedic wisdom. Is that where that term?
Yeah,
Is that,
Veda Garbha, you can see it in the
Veda Garbha?
Sanskrit, it's there.
Right. He says, be neither depressed nor anxious about the execution of creation. What you are begging from me has already been granted before. And how do you understand that it's already been granted before?
Well, looking at the commentary offered by Bhaktivedanta Swami, I was taking it as this has already been accomplished by me previously. In other words, kind of the work of creation. Let me say it in this way. Lord Brahma, and really Lord Brahma as a sort of symbol of who we all are, he's a co-creator with the Supreme Lord. He's not an independent creator. And so this has already been accomplished by me, the Supreme Lord, before, and you are a co-creator. And so and you're being invested with creative potency to manifest this work, which I myself have already done, actually. That's kind of how I took it. And looking at the commentary of Bhaktivedanta Swami, he speaks about being entrusted to do some sort of work that is actually already accomplished by the Supreme Lord. And he gives the example of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 11, where Krishna is saying that time I am, the big universal form is there. And Arjuna is like freaking out. He's just sort of like passing urine and stool from seeing the universal form. He's like really freaking out to see this. And he inquires, what is this form? And Krishna replies that time I am the great destroyer of worlds. But then after that, perhaps a more important verse is like 11th chapter, verse 33. Krishna says that actually this work of killing the armies on the battlefield has been done by me. And you can be but the instrument in which that actually manifests. And so, yes, so similar to that here, because Prabhupada's referencing that in today's purport. So similar to that, I'm understanding it that Brahma, you're actually a co-creator. The work of creation is actually really being done by me, and you're just a co-creator. You can get the credit by being the instrument, but actually I'm the player of the instrument, and you're just the nice sound can come out of you, but I'm actually the player of the instrument. You are a co-creator. And so you need not worry if you can be invested in the notion that you're not an independent creator, but actually sheltered in me. That's kind of how I took it. I have a lot more ideas around that, but that's kind of my first impression. I don't know if you have something on that more.
No, I like that. I mean, that, also interesting, and certainly Srila Prabhupada takes it there. In the commentary. Maybe we can read a bit from that. But I was also thinking, in that verse that you're mentioning in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna refers to Arjuna with a particular name, right? Where he'll use different names for Arjuna throughout, and commentators have have mentioned different ideas of why he's being called Dhananjaya in this verse and why he's being called, Partha in another verse and so on. But in that verse, he's called Savyasachin, right? Which literally, does it mean ambidextrous?
Basically, that's how
Right.
I've understood it. Yeah.
Yeah. But sometimes it's translated just speaking about like his skill in
Right.
terms of shooting arrows, that he can shoot with the left, he can shoot with the right. So therefore, he's asking him to carry out this particular duty, right, on the battlefield. It's like he's not asking someone else, but you're Savyasachin. You're the person that in this particular body that you have with the particular mentality that you, the particular psychology that you have. Here's a suitable way for you to serve, right? And you find your meaning in that. And Brahma's going to find his meaning in this service that he has to do, but he's feeling that performance anxiety going into it. He's just seeing lots of waves and rough waves of water, and he doesn't know how he's going to do it. But why don't we read a little purport?
Yeah.
Prabhupada writes, any person authorized by either the Lord or his bona fide representative is always blessed, as is the work entrusted to them. Of course, the person entrusted with such a responsibility should always be aware, now this is interesting, right, of their own incapability, and must always look for the mercy of the Lord for the successful execution of their duty. One should not be puffed up because they are entrusted with certain executive work. Fortunate is the one who is so entrusted, for if they are always fixed in the sense of being subordinate to the will of the Supreme, they are sure to come out successful in the discharge of their work. We were just speaking about this before we started the show, right? It's like you can read this philosophy in a way that it sounds so disempowering, right? It's like, right? Like in a sense, I can't accomplish anything on my own. Like I don't have any kind of worth here. I'm entirely, dependent. But how do you understand that? Like just say in terms of your own mission in life or your own service.
Yeah, I think that coming to terms with being like small is a sort of existential issue that everyone has a hard time with intrinsically. And I think if you even look at social issues today and having to come to terms with our smallness and our ability to change it, I think let me say it in this way. I think the inability to appreciate how small we are and making those sorts of changes is what makes people more and more like frustrated and angry, and why a lot of these social movements can tend to transform into something very dark, very fast. I mean, there are obviously practical things that we can see with our eyes, but I think there are existential things underpinning the frustration. And part of that existential thing is the not being able to come to terms with one's smallness and their ability to like change things. I'm reminded of this Viktor Frankl quote from Man's Search for Meaning. At some point in the book, he writes that when you're no longer able to change the circumstances, then you're challenged to change yourself. And the first thing you hear when you hear that is no. This thing is happening, that thing is happening, and I have to be the one that makes the difference. And I think certainly in a lot of spiritual literatures, and certainly the Bhagavatam, we're kind of reminded repeatedly, incessantly, that you're very small. Like you gotta really like think of the implications of what that means to be anu. That's the word. The word used for the jiva actually is anu, which means atomic. And we usually zip past that when reading about it, like Bhagavad Gita. Okay, the soul is atomic. We go to the next point. It's like, no, think about the implication of what it means to be anu. It means that you're going to need a lot of support. And I think I have just like a simple practical example. I'm a skinny guy. And if some like big box is there and they're like, can you move that? I'm like, you saw my arms, right?
Now you should see, I just gotta say, and I've said this before, but like when we were moving Mara, you just, you're looking at her, you don't see it, but this girl, she's like lift heavy stuff. How do you do that, Mara? What's your secret?
Okay, yeah, Maris is probably stronger than me, but but if it's like some huge box and it's my, let's say, my duty to move it, like I need to get it out of the way so that people can come into the building in an easy way.
Yeah.
Then I have to immediately recognize my anu quality, and I need to seek help outside of myself for support in moving that big box. That's just like a very simple example. So coming to terms with one's unknown nature doesn't have to be disempowering. I think it translates as disempowerment. I think there are many reasons why it translates that way. But one reason it translates in that way is because we have a God complex.
Right.
And we want to, and that God complex is nourished by the modern culture that tells you you can do everything as an individual. You don't need your family, you don't need your friends. You have the power, and if they don't want to support you, then just forget them. You can do everything independently. So this mentality, of course, in the Bhagavatam is known as Pritak Bhava, the mood of being separate or the mood of being independent. And so that God complex makes it complicated for us to like actually come to terms with, wait, I'm anu and I need support. And that's okay, actually. In fact, coming to terms with that allows me to seek empowerment from other sources and together become empowered in a beautiful way. So for me, I mean, obviously it's still a process. I got a God complex. I promise you, I have a God complex, and it's nasty, but I try to keep it under wraps when I'm in public. But I think experientially, I have had beautiful experiences with recognizing being atomic or small, and just saying like I need support, and obviously not only support from like friends or support from family, because I think a secular mind looks for support from those sources naturally, as does the theological mind. But I think the theological mind also recognizes in their smallness that I need support from above. I need support from reality itself, from God itself, and that can be beautiful. In the same way that it's beautiful to the secular mind that you take help from family and friends and people who can, therapists, you're so vulnerable in front of your, like that's glorious, right?
Right.
So the theological mind just takes it a step further and say, we're taking shelter of God. Like I'm not independent, and it can be beautiful and it can be empowering. And if we refuse to come to terms with that, then it can easily transform into something very nasty, very ugly. And I think a lot of, again, I just like to say this because it's on my mind.
Sure.
A lot of the disturbances that we see large social movements creating, if you see it that way, I mean, I personally see it that way, that social movements have positive seeds maybe, but the fruits that are coming out are not exactly the sweetest fruits. And I think a large portion of that is not coming to terms with this existential reality of being like small and learning to recognize, the boundaries that you have to kind of exist within because of that.
We're on the other day on the show, we were discussing this idea that to have it's not psychologically, it's maybe very common, maybe most common, that we need to accomplish something to feel good about ourselves, right? To show people that I'm important, right? So we try to, and that, for some people that's going to be, rising to some post in life. And for other people, it'll be, their house and their spouse and their kids, and being the person that maintains that, enjoys that, in one way or another, or we're trying to make a mark in the world some way. We're trying to write a book or do something, when we mentioned earlier that like Brahma, we can understand him as like, okay, here's the most intelligent person, right, in the universe. But, I think another way that it's important that we looking at the life of Brahma is that all that he does makes us seem very small, from the length of his lifespan to what the mark that he makes on the universe, right? It's like whatever we accomplish, like Raghunath and I were joking like this. I'd say like, Raghunath, what can you create? Like if I gave you, here's a month and here's a budget, you know, and what are you going to do with it? You know, what could we create? You know, it's like,
Nuisance.
yeah, it's like there's not much we can do. You know, even like if you're a really good carpenter, maybe you could do something nice, but still, it's very small. Whatever you're going to do. Whereas Brahma, he's creating the universe. You know, we have this lifetime. It seems, boy, it's this long stretch of time. You know, we go through so much. It's everything about it is so important. You know, this is my life we're talking about. This life is, in Brahma's life, our life is just a speck. It's like almost nothing, you know. And so so we might try to establish, you know, kind of support our own ego, our own conception of who I am, that I'm not small, you know, that I'm important through accomplishment.
That's the main thrust of my thinking about this particular verse.
Yeah.
That's really resonating with me. Yeah, there in the modern, or let's say the postmodern world, it seems to me we have a really unhealthy relationship with work. Insofar as when you read the Bhagavatam and what we're reading now, work is kind of like I don't know how to put it. Work is the match. That's the match that's going to invoke the fire of creative potential. So Lord Brahma's creative potential is different from, let's say, the other patriarchs of the universe, like Kadharma Muni or, let's say, Indra. And it's going to be different than our creative potential. But if you look at work as a creative, like, I'm going to go with match because that's the only thing I can think of right now.
Stimulus or something?
The match that can invoke the fire of creative potential. So we have to discover what is our creative potential. And as long as you're putting yourself against a Lord Brahma or a Jeff Bezos or a Cardi B or whoever are the popular cultural entities of the day.
Are these your particular ones that you're dealing with in your own? You go, man, Cardi just dropped another record and it's like, it's shooting up the charts.
I got beef with all these people. That's probably why I'm picking them up, because in my mind, I got beef with them. But as long as we're juxtaposing ourselves next to these persons, their creative potential, and I don't really know if they're actually manifesting it or not, because they're creating a lot of nuisance in my head. But in any case, their creative potential is different than our creative potential. And so the work that we're supposed to do is intended to manifest our creative potential. Whereas I notice in the postmodern world, because of this problem of juxtaposing ourselves next to the biggest influencer and superstar and entrepreneur, and
which is a very unusual, historically a very unusual circumstance.
Very unusual, and it's very problematic, because what ends up happening is people. Well, what I've observed, and I have like 4 levels. This is a little bit of a philosophical speculation, but I've put it like 4 levels because of the purport.
You got a 4-level thing too. What's this?
It's just nice for the taxonomy of the categorization is very interesting for the mind. So it's just fun to do things like that. But I noticed that work nowadays, for a lot of especially younger guys, work is like, it's very primal. It's just like about surviving or just making money. It's not about manifesting creative potential. And therefore people have jobs, even jobs that make a lot of money, but they feel very unfulfilled, and they end up getting into a lot of trouble with the money that they've gotten from that work. So I call this like the primal level of approach to work. Then there's maybe a deeper level to this, which
that's defined as work for survival, and
there's
no
survival.
other purpose.
Exactly. It's very base.
Okay.
I have to live, I have to make money. And both ideas are very base, because even those who make a lot of money, it is saying that they have a lot of problems. You know, there was a song when I was growing up. Who was it? Busta Rhymes. The more money I come across, the more problems we see.
Yeah.
You remember this song? Anyway, back to Bhagavatam.
Was that Biggie? I think it was Biggie. I don't know for sure.
Oh yeah, it's Biggie. It's Biggie. Okay, back to Bhagavatam. So that's like level 1. It's very primal, and it's also it ends up being very dissatisfying and also very dangerous for the individual, and from the individual to the very entire population. A deeper level of approach to work is you're finding work that fulfills you. Whether or not that work makes you a lot of money, but it's work that's fulfilling and allows you to live or to survive, and it's fulfilling. And so you're kind of happy. at the very on a personal level, and you don't make a nuisance for the environment around you because you feel fulfilled.
Mhm.
And I think connected to that sort of work, that idea is that's probably the work you're intended to do. So this notion of a work that you're actually intended to do. Lord Brahma is intended to do this particular work. So he has a potency to do that, and that work is going to manifest that potential. And then maybe the third level, and this is the highest level, and the level that I'm kind of, I derived this from the purport and why I gave this sort of breakdown, is the work you're kind of entrusted. This is probably a superset of the previous category, but the sort of work you're entrusted to do by reality, which is going to be obviously the most fulfilling sort of thing. And there's a sense of that connection to divinity, that I'm not a separate entity, but rather I'm I grew up watching X-Men and Fantastic Four and all these sort of shows. There was this character called Multiple Man.
Multiple.
Wait, I promise you this is a good analogy.
All
There was this character called Multiple Man.
We welcome these things on Wisdom of the Sages.
Okay, great.
It's like you're free here.
Okay, cool. So there's this character called Multiple Man, and he had the power. His mutant ability was to expand himself, like make duplicates of himself unlimitedly. And each duplicate, they could act independently. They had like independent thought processes and all that. But the primal, he was called himself the prime, like the prime Multiple Man, was the one from which all these other duplicates extended from. And they were all connected to him in an obvious way.
Now, what would happen if the prime one was killed? What would happen?
Yeah, then the rest of the duplicates would get finished off. But if the duplicates were killed, so anyway, that's another point. Every now
I just couldn't help but ask.
So like that, the souls, because we say as Vedantins that reality is fundamentally non-dual consciousness. So Krishna is that non-dual ground of everything, and we are all extensions of him. We're called as Vibhina Anksha, the forms that are extended from him. So in a sense, we're like small Krishnas. Prabhupada writes like this in Bhagavad Gita chapter 9. Krishna's like the big Krishna, and we're like the small Krishna. Krishna's the prime Multiple Man, and we're like his duplicates. And so as duplicates, we have an intrinsic purpose in relationship to the prime. And if you can discover what that is, in other words, the work that you're entrusted to do, I don't know, somehow that word entrusted really impacted me this morning when I was reading the purport. If you can discover the work that you're entrusted to do, and the work that for which you have that inherent potential given to you by God or connected to that ultimate reality, then not only will you not fail in that work, but it will be the work that is the most satisfying, the most fulfilling, and it will be the work that has the power to heal the entire world. And actually, in the context of what's going on here in this pastime, he's actually got to literally like heal the world, right? Rescue it from the waters of devastation. So if you can discover the work that you're entrusted to do, that work connected to the will of God has the power to, in fact, heal the world. Not only give you fulfillment, but actually heal the world. And if we took that sort of approach to work, not just reducing it to its primal feature of I gotta live, or I gotta like level up with this influencer or that politician or that entrepreneur and so on, but discovering the work for which I have creative potential, and that work will not only be fulfilling for me, but it can actually heal the world. Then that sort of approach to work is very beautiful, is very wonderful. It doesn't have that sort of competitive edge that's so destructive that we see today. And that's kind of the inspiration I was really getting from this first verse of Krishna to Lord Brahma.
Interesting. I like your little construct there, these three levels of work. And and when I look at it, okay, first one, survival, I'm just working to get by. And then the second one's fulfillment, but that fulfillment, it seems like there could be healthy or unhealthy, right? Like what may fulfill me is like something that is harmonious with my nature and something that has some kind of positive contribution that I'm making. But I might also derive fulfillment out of more like what I was speaking about earlier, like I need to accomplish something for my own validation. Right. I need to make my mark on the world, and people need to see it, and that is what's going to give me, in the eyes of others as well, in the eyes of myself, my own fulfillment. is dependent on what I can accomplish externally. Whereas like the Bhagavad Gita is going to kind of speak on this idea of working, but being detached from the results, right? Like the whole thing is, yeah, do the work that you're entrusted to do the work that's harmonious with your nature, and do it with detachment, right? Letting go of the results of the work. And it seems that that idea of accomplishment in our minds is very tied to the work. It appears to us to be the purpose of the work. That's the outcome of the work. But really, you know, what is it, again, if we look at Brahma, what is it that we can accomplish? It's even if it becomes very significant on one level, it's very insignificant on another level. So that's, you know, coming to terms with that smallness that you're speaking of, right? And even Brahma's feeling that anxiety on his level, who accomplishes so much. But you know, but Raghunath and I were speaking about this the other day. But it occurred to me that there's really one accomplishment that we're meant to come to. You know, in other words, it's not our accomplishment that we get our we get our true, you know, sense of peace, our true sense of contentment, our true sense of bliss in life, our happiness in life. It's not tied to the accomplishment. There's one accomplishment to do, and that is to realize that underneath it all, we have happiness. Underneath it all, we have bliss. Underneath it all, we have validation, because we are the energy of God, right? Because just by nature, the soul is pure. The soul is spiritual energy. The soul is eternal. The soul is full of knowledge. The soul is full of bliss. By nature, understanding that there's nothing left to accomplish. So there's only one accomplishment, is to understand it.
Yes.
Right. And let that be the purpose of the work. Like, in other words, let that be the result of the work. That the work is to please and the work is to serve, but what do I get out of it? Ideally, I get the realization. I get self-realization. You know, I understand who I am, and when I really understand that, even my massive accomplishments, which on another scale are minuscule, there's no letdown, or there's no frailty in it. In other words, like, you know, I could become a billionaire through my accomplishments, but if I'm sitting at a table with someone that's like worth 10 billion and I'm worth only 1 billion, suddenly I'm suffering from you know, anxiety again. You know.
Yeah, it's very classic.
Yeah. So the real you know, the positive result of the work, the healthy result of the work, is self-realization. Right.
How do, you know, hearing you say that, it brought my mind to getting minds oriented to a more internal metric for the work that they're doing, like a more internal metric of success for the work that they're doing. And, you know, maybe I'm just speculating here, but this is probably why in the older religious world, whether our own or just like the West, you know, that's why you went to church at least once a week. Then there was Bible study during the week, because the mind is actually intrinsically externally oriented when you're in the conditioned phase of life. The technical term we used in our literatures is bahirmukha, which literally means outward facing.
Turning your face, right?
Yeah, turning. So you're always looking toward the external thing naturally. And so in order to get a more internal metric of success for the work that you do, so the external metric of success for work is accomplishments, you know, and we don't look toward, even today, like, and it gets super dangerous. We don't look toward internal metrics like, do they have good character? Like, okay, I'm sorry to give this example, and please forgive me. I'm not trying to like alienate.
Are we going back to Cardi?
No, we're not going back to Cardi. I'm going back to a more sensitive subject matter, and I'm not going to give details of it because I'm not trying to like be political here or anything. But it's just like there's like a modern tension around, you know, whether to get vaccine or whether not to get vaccine, or, you know, there's all this beef going on everywhere. I'm seeing it, within my friend groups, beef, and I'm like, I'm not interested in beefing about that.
Okay.
I got my pettiness also, I ain't gonna lie, but I'm not interested in beefing about. But one thing that comes up a lot for me is when people say things like, well, we should just trust so and so, and it's like, okay, why should we trust so and so? Well, because he's competent. He did all the work to get the competence in that particular field of knowledge. I'm like, okay, cool, but being competent doesn't mean you're a good person. You trust someone because they're a good person and they have good character, and not just because they're competent. Because the guy who created Frankenstein, he was competent. He wasn't necessarily a good person.
Well,
And so that's a crude example, but I think it goes across the board that as long as we have an external metric of success from our work, then we kind of lose out on the more internal metrics. This is like a lower metric I'm using, a lower internal metric, like good character. That's a lower one. And then the higher one is actually self-discovery. And then for us, we take it to the God discovery. That's like the internal metric that we use. And I guess the question I'm pulling up here, it's not a question, it's more of a comment, but a statement that how do you orient the mind that is so easily moved towards external metrics, towards an internal metric of success? And I guess that's why you do Wisdom of the Sages every day, because you need kind of like daily reminders to move toward the inner world, because we're so pulled towards external things very powerfully.
That's exactly it, isn't it? It's as we just read, right?
Yeah.
Lord Brahma in text 27:28, the Lord saw that Brahma was very anxious about the planning of the construction of the different planetary systems, and was depressed upon seeing the devastating water. He could understand the intention of Brahma, and thus he spoke in deep, thoughtful words, removing all the illusion that had arisen. So yeah, it's I guess these things are so deeply ingrained, and in a world that we live in, which is, as you're saying, it's more bizarre, because it's not like if I play sports that I'm competing on like in my village level. It's not that if I play music, that if I play sports, I'm looking at the best athletes in the world and comparing myself with them through television. If I play music, I'm measuring myself up against the most popular musicians in the world through the different, outlets that we access music through. If I have a certain physical strength, I'm being compared to the most physically strong. If I have a certain physical beauty, I'm comparing myself, and so it's like, how can anyone compete?
Right.
And so all the more reason, to how do we break that cycle? How do we find our happiness when we're living in a world where we just can't compete? How do we feel validation or feel some kind of existential kind of well-being? If we're kind of like constantly exposed to anxiety producing data, coming at us, that's convincing us that we need to accomplish more to get to that place.
Right.
And how can we understand that? No, actually, all of that stuff is very small. All that stuff is very temporary. All this stuff has no lasting meaning. But what it does is your own true nature, and it's lying underneath it. But everything's speaking against that. Everything's pushing us in a different direction. There's one cure, and that's hearing. Being reminded daily, right? So nityam bhagavata sevaya. That's what we do, and that's what you encourage us to do, Jai Jagannath. Thank you for being a living, walking representative of Bhagavatam.
I'm working on it. I'm not going to take that full credit. I'm working on it, but I am definitely attracted to the Bhagavatam. I feel grateful for that, and yeah, this is the work that we have to do. I mean, in one phrase, look within.
Look within. Raghu, you still with us?
I'm with you. I really sat back and just listened and really enjoyed Jai Jagannath. Thank you so much, Prabhu. I feel
Thank you for tolerating me.
lighter and I feel lighter and brighter thanks to you, both of you guys.
Oh. It must be interesting being on the other side and listening to Wisdom of the Sages.
I know. It's yeah. I'm always intimidated to listen to back episodes with my voice, but I can listen to Jagannath easily. I'm scared to listen to my own self. I was like, it's so stupid. That was very beautiful. Both of you guys were insightful, funny, fun to be with.
Well,
Great way to
Raghunath,
start your morning.
this is what you do. You go to Apple Podcasts and you write a 5-star review, okay?
I'm gonna write one right now.